USC, UCLA, leaving the Pac-12, going to the Big Ten, starting in 2024. Ted, I took off on a flight on Thursday to California. Little did I know that an hour and a half later, or whatever, how long, that's probably too short. It was longer than that. 2 plus whatever hours later, I landed in Big Ten country.
Yeah, was pretty shocking. Pretty shocking whenever all of that came out. I guess it's not shocking that the Pac-12 is in trouble and they have some members looking elsewhere. USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, though, that's not really the first thing that you would circle or you would pick. Now, I feel like I heard people like theorizing about this a while back, and I just kind of brushed it off as, yeah, that just really doesn't make sense. Like, God, geographically, how do you make that work? But I don't think geography matters anymore in college football.
I'm with you. I mean, you look at, both schools put their statements out there, right? Well, why they did it. They mention what's best for the future of the athletic programs, mention academics, the values, all that stuff. But just like OU and Texas's move to the SEC, for me, this is about two things: television revenue and staying relevant. That's it. That's the battle in college football right now. It's about television revenue and relevance. And I mean, when you look at the map of USC and UCLA on there with the other Big Ten teams, it's hilarious. I mean, these people saying, well, USC and UCLA, very good academic schools, like their values align with the Big Ten. Listen, I get it. They're good schools, but you're never going to convince me that USC and UCLA are cultural fits in the Big Ten. Nope. Los Angeles and Columbus are very different places. Los Angeles and Ann Arbor are very different places, right? And you're just never going to convince me like, oh, yes, this makes a ton of sense. No, it doesn't. We all know it doesn't. But maybe I should have thought that I never thought the alliance was going to last. I know that. We openly made fun of it on here a lot. And man, it didn't even last a year.
Yeah, it's wild. It's, I feel like they've known this and known it's coming for a while. And well, I mean, that's obvious. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just wake up Sunday morning and move conferences, right? I
see what you did there, by the way.
This is, it really makes sense whenever you think about the moves that USC's been making. Hire a coach, pay him a ton of money, start to make some announcement about facilities and different things you're going to do. They had to know that Big Ten revenue was going to be coming in, right? And be projecting that they're going to be able to pay for a lot more stuff down the road. Some people talking over $80 million a year, perhaps, in the new Big Ten contract. So it's not surprising there. But I think it's a good move for USC and UCLA to go do this, to be relevant, to make more money. I think it's probably good for the Big Ten because it's that low-hanging fruit, that television market on the West Coast that everyone's wanting to tap into so desperately that they keep, projecting all of these things that are going to happen out there. But I just don't know how good it is for USC. I think the feeling for them is that this is really going to help them in recruiting. And I'm not so sure about that. If you consider yourself a 5-star kid in California, and okay, used to you had to pick between the Pac-12, Big Ten, perhaps, SEC. Well, that makes sense that it's going to be hard to perhaps keep that kid out there in the Pac-12. You go to the Big Ten and you think, oh, well, it's going to be way easier to keep those kids going to the Big Ten. And I'm like, I don't know. I think what you just did is made the decision between the Big Ten and the SEC. Would you rather be playing in November in Minnesota, or would you rather be playing in November in Louisiana or in Texas or in Florida or in Georgia? I'm not so sure that everyone's just like saying that the recruiting is like instantly going to be better. I don't know about that. I mean, I could be wrong, but the way I figure it, you've now made people choose between the SEC and the Big Ten, and the SEC checks most of those boxes.
I hear you on that. I will say, I think just how being in the Big 12 was being used against OU, I think USC probably moving forward with Lincoln Riley and that new staff, there are going to be a lot of guys that say, hey, I love the tradition. I love everything about it, but the Pac-12 is just not very good, man. I want to play in the SEC or the Big Ten. So just like how that was being used against OU, I don't think that can be used against USC anymore. I will say, though, kids do like staying close to home. And a lot of people like their parents being able to get to every game relatively easily. And there are going to be a lot of people on the West Coast that look at this and go, that old 6-hour flight to New Jersey doesn't sound very great. Like there's going to be some of that, but ultimately I think kids are less concerned maybe now with location. I still think it may be the number one thing people consider in recruiting, but there's just so much else going on now for college football players, right? With NIL and kind of how you're building your brand and all this stuff. And there's still a lot of value in young players associating their brand with the USC brand. And ultimately USC now can say, hey, we wanted to be in one of, if not the most competitive conference. And now if you're USC, you use the value because the Big Ten's TV deal is about to be huge now, right? Because they were negotiating that. They put it on halt with the anticipation of something like this happening. And now they're going to go back to the negotiating table with ESPN and Fox and say, hey, we've got LA now. What's it worth to you? And that Big Ten media rights deal is going to be huge. And USC is going to say, hey, look at what we did. Look at what we made happen. And it is what it is. I just will say USC is not a Big Ten team. They're just not. And that's going to be the really interesting part of it. Right? Because one of the things that I always thought made big non-conference games and bowl games, especially, BCS bowls, college football playoff type games, was that you would get these teams that never played because they're in different parts of the country and maybe they play different styles. And then you get to see them play and you see what happens. I don't know if I really just don't know how USC is going to fare in the Big Ten. Like instead of going to Corvallis in November, they're going to be going to Columbus. That's a really big change, man. So I just don't know. I don't know, but I can't imagine this is what Lincoln Riley thought he was signing up for.
No,
there's no way in hell he knew this was coming.
No, and that's been reported. And if you take that as accurate, some people assume that he's out, hopping to the NFL as soon as he gets an opportunity. I don't know if that's the case, but I do think it's interesting that they don't fit in the Big Ten. Nothing about USC makes you feel like it's the Big Ten. And, it really didn't ever matter how bad they were or what happened in the Pac-12. They were always going to be the number one spot, right? They were always going to be USC. That ain't going to be the case anymore in the Big Ten, especially whenever you're like so separated from everyone else. And it's going to be a long while, in my opinion, before they ever even are close to winning the Big Ten Conference. They've turned themselves into another school. And you could say that maybe that's the same case with Oklahoma going to the SEC, but Oklahoma is at a totally different standing right now than what USC is. Like, there's a good chance that, I mean, Oklahoma probably they will make the playoff, in my opinion, between now and when they go to the SEC. They are way more relevant going into that conference than USC is going into the Big Ten. And we're in the region, right? We're tied to the region. Pretty much, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, we're right there. We're in the pocket of the SEC already. So it makes sense geographically. This is a weird situation for USC.
It is. And honestly, it's a weird situation for college football. Like, just saying it out loud, like the USC's in the Big Ten. What? No. Big Ten is 2 tight ends, a fullback, running ISO in the snow. It's not good LA weather in November, man. That's going to take some getting used to. And, one of the reasons that I thought Lincoln took that job was that he thought he could build a more talented roster than anybody in the Pac-12, and that the path to the playoff would be very manageable once he did that. And we don't even really know what the college football playoff is going to look like now, but I feel like that just got a lot more difficult. Like, they had an Oregon problem. Now they've got Ohio State and Michigan. If Michigan keeps rolling things and it's a different style of football.
And they still may have an Oregon problem before it's all said and done.
True. Very true. So yeah. I don't know, but you mentioned, I think it's important to think about how this does affect OU, right? Because there's a big part of me, and I haven't talked to anyone with inside information about this, but with USC and UCLA making that move to the Big Ten in 2024, I just can't imagine Greg Sankey will want the Big Ten to get all of that attention by itself. And it would seem that the SEC would be highly motivated to have OU in Texas playing SEC football in 2024 when UCLA and USC are playing Big Ten football. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it just makes a lot of sense. Just with now the way that we know that Greg Sankey kind of operates and his mentality, like, the guy wants to dominate college football. There's no doubt about it. I just can't imagine him letting the Big Ten have a full season like that. I just can't see it happening, man.
I agree. And really I feel like this is kind of a network issue, right? And I think Sankey is going to be applying the pressure, and I feel like it's going to be up to the networks to kind of make that stuff happen and let those deals unfold. Like, for instance, OU and Texas leaving the Big 12. Well, I could totally see the ESPN wanting that to happen soon as well, and having a vested interest in, depending on how things fall, like eating that payout or buyout, or delivering it to the Big 12 via network money. You know what I'm saying? Something to make it where, okay, let's do this quickly. We'll facilitate it and make it all work. Because I think sitting around and like trying to hold buyouts over people right now, when you got this much movement, it's probably just better for everyone to rip the Band-Aid, restructure it, try and get some new network money going, and move on as quickly as possible. Could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a lot that happens between now and then. Right. So we'll see. But the question now, I think for college football becomes what's next? Like what's the next domino to fall? And it seems like nothing else is going to happen when it comes to this realignment shakeup until Notre Dame decides what it's going to do. And there are all kinds of things being reported, right? But I just don't think anything else happens until Notre Dame decides what it wants, because the Big Ten wants Notre Dame. The SEC wants Notre Dame. Everybody wants Notre Dame. And I am sure that, you think about the Big Ten hitting pause on that media rights negotiation. There's no doubt that they are going to be able to bring Notre Dame some big figures saying, hey, we've talked to our media partners, and this is what it looks like if you come with us. And I know that Notre Dame has essentially always valued their independence over everything. But will the Big Ten be able to also, could they come up with some type of custom deal for Notre Dame and their broadcast rights? I don't know where NBC gets looped into. I don't know how it would work. But if Notre Dame joins a conference, which I really don't think they're in any hurry to do, I can't imagine it wouldn't be the Big Ten. But who knows? Hell, maybe the SEC calls them and say, hey, why would you want to be part of that? Come be part of what we got going on. Now, I'm sure Notre Dame fans probably think they're a better cultural fit in the Big Ten, but we just saw with USC and UCLA, as far as the cultural fit stuff, it's really not that big of a deal anymore.
If you were Notre Dame, where would you want to go?
I'd stay independent.
Really?
Yeah. My thing is the path to the playoff, they're always going to want to let Notre Dame have a path. And that's a school. It's got a ton of money. Now, I understand it could be making way more money, but Notre Dame isn't exactly hurting for funding unless I miss something.
Yeah.
So
$60 more million a year is.
I hear you, but if you got a path to the playoff and a realistic path to play for a championship, and I wouldn't join the Big Ten next week or anything like that. I'd make them wait it out. I'd let them sweat. That's what I would do if I was Notre Dame. I'd say, hey, we're not in any hurry. That Big Ten media rights deal is not up for a couple years. And I would just make everyone else miserable because everyone else is waiting for what Notre Dame's going to do.
Yeah. And that makes sense. But if I was Notre Dame, I'd go to the SEC.
I would too. If I picked a conference, I'd go to the SEC.
You fit too good in the Big Ten. And what I mean by that is you're going in to compete with a bunch of schools that are really similar to you. Similar in feel, similar in academics, similar in all those, like, it's just, if you just ask someone random, they would assume, if they didn't know, that Notre Dame was in the Big Ten, right? They're in the same conference. If you go to the SEC, you instantly have a trump card on everyone there in academics. You're exposed to an entire new world of recruiting options in that region of the country instead of kind of the same place where you are now. I think it would be best for them to go to the SEC. Don't think that that's going to happen. I think if there's a move, that it probably is the Big Ten. But if I had a choice, I would go to the SEC if I was them.
I'm just imagining all the shock from Notre Dame alums if they went to the SEC. I will say, you become even more attractive if you're Notre Dame, right? In your area of the country, if you all of a sudden are, essentially the Big Ten area's SEC team.
Yeah.
If guys want to play in the SEC, Notre Dame's a lot closer to a lot of big cities in that area of the country than it is to some SEC schools. So
they're watching Notre Dame play a game in sunny Gainesville while Ohio State is playing at Minnesota in a driving snow. I mean, snow games look like fun to play in, I know, but that Florida weather, that, LSU, Texas, I don't know. I would want to set myself apart from everyone else in that region if I was Notre Dame. But, that's my 5 minutes of thought into it. They would definitely put way more thought than that.
Yeah, I think the leaders of that university think awfully highly of themselves. And as you mentioned, it feels very Big Ten-ish from that aspect of things. But remember, this is about football. Right? As much as people want to.
Yeah, I honestly feel like the Big Ten is going to add USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Notre Dame to get to 20.
What about Cal? Cal just left out in the cold.
Cal will be part of the Big 12, Pac-12 merger.
Yeah. So about that, there's all kinds of different, and this stuff is going to continue to evolve, but there's reports out there that the Big 12 is going to try to poach as many as 6 Pac-12 teams. Whether that's really not a merger, that is one conference absorbing the other pretty much when you're taking 6 of the remaining 10. But the 4 that a lot of people think could be a good possibility are Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado. They'd fit nicely in the Big 12, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of natural there.
Yeah. And then Utah, which would be a lot of fun. Now that BYU is going to be in the Big 12, that'd be a fun little rivalry. And I think that Oregon and Washington, I don't think it's any secret they want to join the Big Ten. I think that, when you read the reporting that's out there, that's kind of where they're at, but it doesn't sound like the Big Ten is in any hurry to give them an invitation. So for Oregon and Washington, it becomes the choice of, okay, do we want to join the Big 12 or do we trust these other 8 schools in what's remaining of the Pac-12 that we can stay unified and help this thing survive? And there's also the reports of the Pac-12 and the ACC and a loose partnership. That's what Dennis Dodd called it, a loose partnership that could involve some regular season crossover games, an end of the season game where the conferences are playing each other for a conference championship in Vegas. You had the Ross Dellinger thing that came out after that, where there are discussions about some sort of broadcasting partnership between the ACC and Pac-12, where essentially the ACC network or some ESPN channel of some sort would have exclusive rights to broadcast Pac-12 games to the West Coast. Like, there's a lot going on with the Pac-12, man. I
don't blame them. They're scrambling. All that stuff sucks. The conference is dead. They're going to have to join with the Big 12.
The second I saw that USC was leaving, my initial thought was, well, Pac-12's done. And that's no slight at Oregon and Washington. It's just Pac-12. And I guess you could say, well, did you not think the Big 12 was going to die? The timing's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Where, hey, the Pac-12 last year, they decided to stand pat. They could have tried and raided the Big 12 when OU and Texas announced they were going to leave. And George Kliavkoff and all those people out west said, no, we're good. Well, now you lost USC. Now you lost UCLA. And
did he have a Bowlesby quote of he's not losing any sleep over it?
I still think this is all Larry Scott's fault, but George Kliavkoff's going to be the one remembered for
Yeah.
You know, he was the commissioner, just like Bowlesby's going to be remembered for the OU and Texas stuff. Like it's, you know, one of the first bullet points on Kliavkov's Pac-12 commissioner resume is going to be, oh yeah, USC and UCLA left.
Yep.
Just is what it is. Comes with the job, I suppose.
It's tough. You know, who knows what world we'll be living in by the next time we do a podcast. Definitely by the end of this season, and like next summer, this seems to be a summer topic where this all pops up. I feel kind of like you do that, especially if Notre Dame makes a move soon or announces something soon, one way or the other. If they say they're staying or if they say they're going somewhere, I feel like the dominoes are going to fall. This thing's going to be repackaged, and we'll have a new look college football conference realignment relatively quickly.
Yeah, and as more things happen, and maybe we see some more realignment, you and I, we're definitely going to have some discussions about how we feel about the way that college football is going to look.
Yeah.
And whether or not that's good for college football. But that, I'm sure that conversation is coming. But we're going to wait. We're going to wait to have that conversation once we know what it actually looks like.
It's wild, dude. I don't know.
USC's in the Big Ten, bro.
I know USC's in the Big Ten. It is college football over the last 2 years. It's really not the college football we've known for so long. Is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. Maybe there's just some of this nostalgia we're hanging on to, and it won't be very long before we forget all about it. And we got new games and new matchups and new rivalries, and we really don't care. You know, and I kind of feel like that's the case. It's just the change that we're resistant to, but I don't know. I do think it's almost a desperate move that everyone thinks that, oh, now that USC is in the Big Ten, that everyone in LA is going to be watching them get their asses kicked by Ohio State. Now, I just don't know that that's going to be the case.
We'll see.
Yep.
I don't know either.